So it looks like China is helping the Houthis to attack American warships in the Red Sea, which isn't ideal, but also not new. I mean, we've known about this for a couple months now, but it doesn't look like China has any interest in intervening at all. So at this point, it kind of seems like the United States is just layering on more and more evidence. The most recent piece of evidence came out in a Financial Times article a few hours ago titled, quote, "The U.S. says Chinese firm is helping the Houthis target American warships. A Chinese satellite company linked to the country's military is supplying Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen with imagery to target U.S. warships and international vessels in the Red Sea, according to American officials." So the issue here is this satellite company. We're going to get into some accusations later about dual-use technology, Chinese dual-use technology, making its way into Houthi missiles and drones that are actually flying at our service members in the Red Sea, and probably Israel too, probably in some of those missiles they're slinging up north. Now, according to a senior U.S. State Department official, they say, quote, "The United States has raised our concerns privately numerous times to the Chinese government on Changguang Satellite Technology Company Limited's role in supporting the Houthis in order to get Beijing to take action." The official added that China had ignored the concerns, and the Chinese embassy in Washington said it was not aware of the relevant situation. So a little bit of a he said, she said. Who are you going to trust here? Is it the United States that we continually warn China, stop letting the Houthis use your stuff? It might even get a little more nuanced than that. Or is it China saying, we don't have any idea what you're talking about at all? We would never support a group that you have listed as a foreign terror organization. Now, the CGSTL, which is an easier way, a little acronym for that company, this isn't the first time they've been on the radar for the United States. Back in 2023, this group was actually sanctioned by the U.S. for providing high-resolution satellite imagery, near real-time battlefield updates to the Russian Wagner group as they were fighting in Ukraine. And a key note in some of these articles is they say Russia or China has so many of these satellites right now, this company specifically, that they're able to take a picture anywhere in the world every 10 minutes. So that's not a real-time update, but it's close. That is pretty impressive technology. And you can imagine how useful that would be on a battlefield, right? Now, again, this isn't the first series of accusations being brought against China writ large in supporting the Houthis. Back in January 2025, so just a couple months ago, Israeli I-24 News reported that China is helping the Houthis obtain weapons in return for unmolested Red Sea passage, which didn't really pan out. We've talked about this before. The Houthis shot at everybody. They shot more at the United States, especially at the U.S. military vessels, than anyone else, but there were some Chinese ships that got hit, some Russian ships that got hit, all sorts of stuff. Nonetheless, looks like there may have been some sort of deal, at least in the works there. I-24 reports, quote, "A secret collaboration between Beijing and the Houthis has been uncovered, revealing a vast network of supply of sophisticated armaments that threaten the stability of the Red Sea. According to American intelligence sources speaking to I-24 News, the Iran-backed Yemeni terror group is using Chinese-made weapons in their attacks in exchange for immunity for ships flying the Chinese flag." Again, hit or miss as to whether or not that actually panned out. I know one of the ways that China was really drug into this was a lot of the workers on these ships were Chinese, which is very different than it flying a Chinese flag, but nonetheless. They say this network allows them to acquire advanced components and guidance equipment for their ballistic and cruise missiles. Houthi leaders are reportedly planning to manufacture hundreds of cruise missiles capable of striking Persian Gulf states using these same Chinese components. Washington has repeatedly passed on this information to Beijing since September, so we've known about this for a little while now, including detailed lists of Chinese companies involved in this arms mechanism. So now we're talking about going back, 6-7 months that the United States has known about this and has been passing this information to China, and not just broad accusations, but dialing it into specific companies saying this company is providing, now we've got the satellite imagery, previously dual-use technology that's making its way into Houthi drones and missiles. Now, a big question here, understandably so, would be why? What on earth does China have to gain from doing this? And the Atlantic Council actually talked about this in an article back on January 14th, where they said, quote, "China is supporting the Houthis. Here's how the Trump administration can respond." So kind of a double whammy here. We'll get into, we can kind of gloss over the support of the Houthis because we've already hit on that. We can talk about why they're doing it, but then also what they have as a recommendation for Trump to move forward with. They say China strategically benefits from free riding on the U.S. security umbrella in the Middle East. As China conserves resources, the United States struggles to pivot to the Indo-Pacific. The added drain of U.S. blood, treasure, and credibility is just the cherry on top for Beijing. Hey, what did we see this week? A U.S. carrier strike group redeployed from the Pacific to the Middle East, USS Carl Vinson, and we saw at least some air defense assets move from the Pacific theater to the Middle East. So if you're China, like, hey, seems to be doing the trick. Whether those are directed at Iran or the Houthis, either way, they're no longer directed at China. Elbridge Colby, actually the new Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, talked about this a few months ago, where he said, quote, "Why would China help us address the Houthi problem when it obviously distracts and depletes us?" So that's one piece of it. It's keeping us tied up. So if China can do any little thing possible to keep us tied up in the Middle East, they're going to. They also say China seems to believe that opposing the Houthis risks Beijing being perceived as supporting a globally unpopular Israel or submitting to U.S. leadership. Yun Sun of the Stimson Center of the Brookings Institution summarized this position as the three no's dictum: no cooperation, no support, and no confrontation. As the shipping industry adjusts to the disruptions, Beijing can absorb some losses as long as the United States and its allies lose more. Whether or not that's part of the plan, you can kind of see how that's playing out, right? Just don't do anything, possibly, that could look to align with the United States in any way, shape, or form. So this is a step a bit further from just doing nothing to actively supporting the Houthis, be it through, quote, private institutions that are linked to their military. It's not overt support from the Chinese government, but it is a step further, escalatory in a lot of ways, right? Risky to do this. Talk about the Houthi strikes. If one of these lands and manages to kill a U.S. service member, we find out that the guidance system in that had components from Chinese manufacturers, kind of opens Pandora's box, doesn't it? So in terms of what to do, this Atlantic Council article said, quote, "In bilateral talks, the incoming Trump administration," remember this was published before Trump came into office, "should directly address Chinese support for the Houthis. Publicly and privately, U.S. diplomats must press Beijing to curtail arms sales, dual-use exports, and illicit financing to the group." I haven't seen anywhere else talking about arms sales, really, or any evidence of that, but notable, they call that out. At the same time, the U.S. government should declassify intelligence showing Chinese support for the Houthis and release it before the United Nations Security Council and other international groups to establish Beijing's complicity beyond a reasonable doubt. That might be part of what we're seeing right here, right? It doesn't look like China's doing anything about it. They're still denying that this is happening at all. So again, more evidence coming out showing, hey, it's not just these dual-use components, it's also this real-time satellite imagery that you've got flying over the Red Sea helping the Houthis with targeting. So it's a step shy of presenting it to the United Nations, which, we're kind of on the out with the UN right now. So I don't know that that's necessarily the route we'd go, but making it more publicly available does seem to be the route the U.S. is taking. Now, in looking at some responses to these initial assessments, and these are old, these are, again, back in January 2025, just kind of drive home these are not new accusations. Looking at FDD, or Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Jack Burnham, a research analyst, said, quote, "China's assistance to the Houthis is yet another signal that Beijing is actively contributing to global chaos and instability. From Chinese firms allegedly providing drones to Russia for its war in Ukraine to now providing support to a proxy group conducting strikes against Israel and the United States, China is cementing its status as an arsenal for autocracies." I haven't seen a lot. We just, like last week or the week prior, saw the first Chinese soldiers in Russia. Still trying to kind of unpack what exactly that means. Fighting under the Russian flag. But there's been a lot of rumors about Chinese drones in Russia. I'm not sure if those are substantiated yet at this point. Definitely a lot of dual-use technology that's helping to keep the Russian war machine running, and China is continuing to purchase so much Russian oil to kind of keep their economy afloat. But China's been, I would say, a little more standoffish with Russia than most people probably expected when the war began. Then turning over to Clifford May, the founder and president of FDD, he said, quote, "We now have credible reports that China's communist rulers are supplying arms to the Houthi Islamists in Yemen, supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran. By now, it should be apparent to the West that the West is literally under fire from an axis of aggressors: Beijing, Moscow, Tehran and its proxies, and Pyongyang. They are determined to establish a new international order based on their power and their rules. The United States and its European allies have to respond effectively to this reality. Perhaps the incoming administration will do a better job." So again, these are not new accusations, but they're piling up and kind of making their way front and center, especially as the United States continues to stockpile military assets and resources in the Middle East, probably looking at Iran, but also very well could be looking at taking even more significant strikes against the Houthis. And we've talked about it before. As those assets are moved, whether they're moved directly from the Pacific theater to the Middle East, that's, of course, a direct drain on capabilities to counter China. But even if they're moved from anywhere else around the world, there's a cost associated with that. And now that they're deployed in an active combat zone, that is the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, they can't easily be removed and pushed somewhere else maybe as fast as if they were in the United States and on some sort of standby or maybe undergoing training. So all of this does tie us up. The longer it goes on with Iran and the Houthis, it does keep us focused in the Middle East when there's a lot of argument that we should be shifting over to the Pacific. But this is definitely something worth keeping an eye on. That's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.